Will the Dallas Cowboys draft a running back in the 2022 NFL Draft? All that and so much more on this episode of the show.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked on Cowboys. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. I am joined by Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And Landon, we're going to get to your Twitter questions today. The first question comes from Zach. He wants to know, should the Cowboys look to spend a late round pick on a running back this season with the expectation that Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard could be gone after this year? If so, what type of running back would you like to see in Dallas?
Well, I think that running back has got to be a position that they have to consider because of what you just mentioned, the contract status. I do think that they have a guy that they like, Enrico Dowdle, that will be coming back. I think he's something that they can at least potentially vision for some kind of role maybe next year and beyond if they wanted to have like a third guy in the mix. But I think that, yeah, I mean, essentially they're going to lose their top two running backs, after I think next year. And so they need, or at least with Zeke, you would think so because of the contract situation. That kind of becomes the first year where it's palatable. So I think, yeah, getting a guy in kind of in the later rounds to start, kind of getting him ready for the NFL, especially if you like somebody that you think could be a developmental guy, getting him in a year early would definitely be helpful. I think that you're likely, if you're going to lose both of those guys, you're not going to re-sign either of them. You're likely going to need to draft another guy as well. I mean, I don't know that a late round guy necessarily by himself is going to do it, just because the room's very barren, right? Like at the very least, I would think you need a couple different running backs to kind of shoulder that load. So whether you believe in the idea of running back by committee or a singular kind of running back taking the carries, I think drafting one in the late round is a start, but it's not the finish of kind of developing that running back room in 2023 and beyond.
All right, a couple of questions here. How sure are we that Zeke is going to be gone after this year? Because yes, they can start getting out of his contract after next year. They would save $4.8 million if they cut him. They would still have a dead cap hit of $11.8 million. But I almost wonder if 2024 is the year, because that they would save $8.2 million if they cut him that year. Only $6 million dead cap. So maybe the answer is you find somebody to replace Tony Pollard, right? And you kind of maybe continue to use Elliott as that in between the tackle guy, the pass protecting back, and you replace Pollard, not Zeke, this offseason.
Yeah, and maybe that's the idea, right? Is that you kind of try to find a more dynamic guy, that maybe you try to find another Pollard, right? That is kind of slips through the crack in a deep class, or is kind of making a transition from another position. You find a guy who can kind of give you some explosives from the backfield, and then if you need to, you can keep Zeke an extra year. And then kind of transition that role to somebody else, maybe get a veteran free agent after that year, or someone that's cheap, and then kind of give the keys to whoever is that kind of that back that you've drafted, that you've developed, and then kind of go from there. But I think running back is one of those spots where they're likely going to need to find a couple different solutions, right, to kind of fill that role. There may not be a silver bullet. It may be drafting a guy, signing a guy, developing a lower round draft pick.
I think for me, though, anymore, I'm just drafting guys with speed at the running back position, right? Like, you got to be able to hit home runs. And I know there's parts of that that's not necessarily just based on speed, but I want the athletes back there that, hey, if it's blocked well, they can take a 6-yard run, 60 yards. Like, that's the type of guys I'm looking for. And I've done a little bit of research in this class, Landon, and there's just not a lot of those athletes at the running back position. And maybe that's kind of the way the NFL is going anyways. Maybe we're seeing the more athletic guys play other positions.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that, one of the options here is to try to find a guy that is kind of a blend, a kind of, I think what we've seen with the way that San Francisco kind of, used some of their players, and frankly, the Cowboys did it too. I mean, a little bit with CeeDee Lamb, they saw him getting carries. But those two positions are starting to blend in a little bit together. And Deebo Samuel is obviously the kind of key example there, the best of the best example there, and is, certainly not, not a normal player, not a guy that every team has, right? The ability to kind of just plug in a guy who could really run the football like that. But I do think that that's something that the team should look forward to, because I do think that there is a body type, an athlete type that is coming out of college football that may not have had kind of the one-to-one fit into NFL offenses in the past. But now that job may be a little bit more open. Maybe drafting a slot receiver that you're giving 5 to 6 carries a game as well is something that you start seeing in the future a little bit. So don't just look at the running back position, I would say, for the Cowboys. Look for, guys that have experience running the football in college backfields that could also line up out wide and play wide receiver. It would be interesting to see if Tony Pollard got drafted this year, how his usage would maybe potentially be changed as it was where he was drafted, right? Like I wonder if and frankly, it'll be interesting to see if the Cowboys deploy Tony Pollard a little differently next year, maybe using him more as a wide receiver and kind of blending that role up a little bit, almost like a reverse Deebo Samuel. So I do think that the wide receiver and running back position is going to have a lot of crossover kind of moving forward, and that that dam has been broken because of people like Deebo Samuel.
Yeah, so I just looked up something really quickly as you were talking. The Cowboys they averaged about 27.5 rushes a game. I wonder what the correct split is, how to use those carries anymore. Like, do you give somebody like CeeDee Lamb 7 carries a game, and then your quarterback has 3 carries a game, and now you're down to 17 traditional runs by running back? Or maybe if it's even less than that, maybe you try to get your receivers 10 carries a game. I just wonder if the Cowboys or the rest of the league should start looking at it that way. Like, hey, our traditional running back only needs 12 touches or 12 carries a game. If we're giving him more than that, it's probably not super beneficial to our offense.
I think that the development and the kind of analytical conversation as to what is valuable in running the football has now evolved to the idea that I think running the football is important. I think that people need to start recognizing that it is an important thing. I think what we're learning is that running the football does not always and should not often mean turning around and handing the ball to the running back. It means zone read. It means, jet sweeps. It means putting a specialty player in the backfield, giving them the football. I think that all things should be on the table for the running back moving forward. And we need the thing that we need to move away from potentially is kind of this idea that one running back takes 27 carries in a game. And that's the only focus. The running game needs to start being treated very similar to the passing game, where you're kind of spreading out these touches across multiple players so that you can kind of spread the punishment that gets doled out as well. But also because those kind of mixing and matching of those personnel can create big play opportunities, because the defense kind of has to adjust their speed in order to kind of anticipate who's on the field.
You even saw, Deebo Samuel was the best example of a team using a diverse rushing attack, but you saw moments this year where teams were taking off their quarterback to put in a better runner under center. Like the Chiefs were a perfect example, right? On 3rd and short, they're taking Mahomes off the field. And they're putting Blake Bell under center to run a quarterback sneak because he's just better at running that, and it protects your quarterback. The Raiders did it they took Derek Carr off the field. They used Marcus Mariota in the backfield, and I wonder if that's also a little bit of a trend as well. The Dolphins did it with Jacoby Brissett, one of the best quarterback sneakers at the position. They took 2 off the field, and because Brissett's a bigger guy, more effective. Maybe that's what running the ball is going to look like kind of going forward over the next 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I think creativity, we've seen a creativity revolution in the passing game. In the run game, it's the creativity has just been about, in the past, it's just been about kind of mixing and blending zone and run schemes and bringing some, kind of run concepts from college. But I think, the next horizon is kind of mixing the variety of the players that are actually taking the carries. I think that's, an interesting next step in evolution of running game.
All right, let's take a quick break so we can tell you guys about Bet Online. Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full steam with both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next coach fired is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all of your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds, right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Landon, this next question comes from Adam. He wants to know, what are the chances that the Cowboys draft a safety with one of their top picks? I know it's not in their nature to do that, but maybe Dan Quinn coming back a second year might have more influence on how they handle the position. Before I let you answer this, I just want a little bit of some background information. During Dan Quinn's time with the Falcons, so from 2015 to 2020, they drafted one total safety, Keanu Neal, who plays linebacker now for the Cowboys. Do you think Dan Quinn just doesn't value that position like the Cowboys don't, or do you think it depends on the player?
I think it probably depends on the player. But, I also think the Cowboys are in a situation where they are, we talked about it, I think, on Friday, right? They are in a spot where they could potentially re-sign all of their starting safeties for very cheap. So, they may choose to do that and go with the kind of experience, route as opposed to wasting a draft pick there. So I think if the right guy fell to them, that kid from Michigan is Dax Hill. I think he may be a guy that might be kind of
more of a slot player to me, but that's
no, you're not wrong. I think that there are some guys in there that the kid from Penn State. I'm not great with the names. Brisker, yeah. There's guys that are, I think, are in their kind of range that potentially they could be looking for, but I also think that it's easy for them to say, okay, we can re-sign all three of our starting safeties who we liked last year for very cheap. Even the most expensive guy is probably only going to cost us $5 million, maybe. So if you could sign all three for like less than $10 million, I would rather do that than waste a draft pick on a guy that I like but don't love, and especially if there's other talent at that same spot in the draft, I may just kind of opt for that route and alleviate one of my needs going into the draft.
I agree. If we look back at last year, they really liked Richie Grant. I remember the War Room cam. I believe it was McCarthy. They got upset when Richie Grant got picked ahead of them. They also liked Trevon Merrick a little bit. They had to pivot once he went with the Raiders trade up one pick ahead of them. So I don't think they're opposed to drafting a safety. I think it just has to be the right guy.
Yeah.
Right.
So. Yeah, I think, I don't think that they're like, it's against their beliefs to draft safety or anything like that, despite what evidence may tell you. I think it's more just that the situation is right. And honestly, the NFL just doesn't value safeties the way that we do, the way that people that evaluate the game do that are outside
what's
the
changed
NFL.
so much is I remember even 3-4 years ago, the league valued free safety so much. Like that was, if you were a strong safety in the NFL, you might as well have had leprosy, right? Like they just didn't care about you at all, right? But if you're a free safety who can be that deep center fielder like Earl Thomas, that's so valuable. And I really feel like in a matter of 2 years, it's completely flipped, right? The guys that can come down in the box and hit and play like a linebacker and can play within like 10 yards, those are the guys that have a lot of value. And the deep center fielders, it's just like, just don't get us killed back there and you're fine, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's it, and honestly, as they started to move away from a lot of the cover 1 and cover 3 stuff, you're starting to get more and more of this split safety look. So even the kind of more valuable aspects of the safeties games have been mitigated to a large degree as teams move away from middle of the field close coverage to mofo coverage. So I think that it's gonna be interesting to see what someone like Jesse Bates's free agent market is going to be, because honestly I think that's going to be an interesting bellwether for exactly where the safety position is going, kind of as a whole. Because he's the closest thing they have to a top safety. He can play free safety. He's not Earl Thomas-esque, but he's probably the best true center fielder, or one of them in football, and he's a free agent. So I think if anyone's going to get paid as a safety, it's likely to be him. But I don't know that the market is that huge for him.
I agree. All right, next question from Brady. Name a handful of players that may be available for trade that you'd be willing to go after. So this is really tricky because the Cowboys don't have a lot of cap space, right? So if they trade for somebody, it's going to have to be somebody on a rookie contract, right? Probably.
Yeah, probably so.
Okay. So that makes this discussion tough.
Yeah.
I'll give you some names. If the Cowboys are wanting to save some money and they want a receiver back, you could ask Jacksonville to flip like Laviska Shenault for Amari Cooper. I would hate that trade, but at least you're saving cap space and getting a prospect back. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it makes sense. Look, all of this is kind of in the context of us desperately trying to make this trade make sense, trying to figure out like the rumor more than anything else. So,
I got another one.
Yeah, give me
more.
another one. Yeah.
What if the Cowboys move on from? Let's say they keep Randy Gregory and DeMarcus Lawrence denies a pay cut. AJ Epinesa is somebody who could probably be available for a trade, like a day 3 pick. But he interests you as like a base left end.
I mean, again, we're just trying to fit like this stuff. I guess. I mean, I don't know. It almost kind of then, hastens the getting rid of DeMarcus Lawrence too, right? It's like Epinesa. I didn't love Epinesa coming
Neither
out.
did
So
I.
yeah, so he doesn't really move the needle for me too much, to be honest. But I mean, again, we're trying to kind of ham fist this situation into getting something worthy of return on a trade like this, which really speaks to whether we should be doing this trade or not.
I'm going through like some of the Falcons guys that they drafted like over the last couple of years, just to see like, is there anybody that would make sense? Marlon Davidson, an Auburn guy. Would you be interested in that?
I mean, I think he kind of, he can give you some interior pass rush. I mean, he hasn't really produced a ton so far in his career, so I don't know if like it's really.
There's not a lot of great names out there.
There really isn't. Yeah, I just it's more like you should just try to trade the pick value and if that's what you're gonna do, and or flop spots or something like.
Yeah.
Often trying to ham fist these guys, like especially in rookie deals or that could fit underneath the cap. It's not a perfect fit.
All right, one last one. Another Falcons guy, Chris Lindstrom, the guard that they drafted from Boston College a couple years ago. They haven't loved him there. Is that interesting to you at all? Now his cap number is a little high, but you probably could get him for late day 2, early day 3 pick.
Side note, real quick, is he the brother of the center that's coming out?
Yes.
That's his brother? Okay, I was wondering. He hasn't been life altering. I mean, a lot of his stuff has been injury related and kind of just coming back from an injury and trying to get back up to speed. I mean, if you're trying to make a trade work, that's one thing, but I don't know that I'm like,
did grade out as PFF's 6th best offensive guard last year.
That's pretty good. I don't know. I haven't watched a ton of him, but it feels like it's still like an underpay for what the Falcons are getting out of this. In my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's our takeaway here. There's just not a lot of guys here that.
What about Calvin Ridley?
So he was drafted in 2018, 18, 19, 20, 21. I think he's got the 5th-year option that he needs to get paid. It's basically the same exact situation that you had with Amari a few years ago, right? Ridley's older.
You hate Ridley. Like you're constantly. This is all like reverse engineered to try to like make sure that Ridley's not seen as good. But
no, I'm just saying. Like, I actually think Ridley would be a really good fit with Dak and CD. I just don't know if I'm giving up a lot for that player right now.
Yeah, I mean, again, like this is kind of going back to what are we doing here? Like, you know what I'm saying? Are we getting rid of the salary? If we're getting rid of the salary, Calvin Ridley makes a lot of sense because you're getting not an equivalent player, but a player of certainly, you know, as close as you're going to get to a Cooper, right? And then for what we're doing, and then, you know, obviously the pick. So I think the Ridley makes some sense simply because of his situation in Atlanta.
Right. He's $11 million this year. That's all it would be. Do you think the Falcons would be up for a Amari Cooper for Calvin Ridley swap?
Oh, are we just talking about now just trading him straight up?
Yeah, well, let's just ask. Do you think they would be interested?
Oh yeah, I think they would be interested. They better be interested, right?
A guy
that's no, I wouldn't do that.
You would save $5 million.
That's not enough for me. I would need the picks too. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. The Calvin Ridley situation for them is not good. Like as it stands right now, Atlanta's not going to get anything from Calvin Ridley. So for the Cowboys, they're like kind of doing them a little bit of a favor as well. And on top of that, giving them Amari Cooper. So we want the picks as well. Like you're giving.
Yeah. So the benefit for Dallas would be you're saving $5 million of cap space basically, and you're getting a player to replace Amari.
Yeah,
that's probably not bad, right?
Yeah, but that's not enough for me though, right? Like to me,
I don't disagree. I don't disagree, but I could see the appeal for it if you're Dallas. Like if the option is, hey, we're just going to cut Amari Cooper, do this trade 100 times out of 100. But I don't think that should be the option, right?
I certainly prefer them straight up trading him to Atlanta for Ridley. As opposed to them just cutting him. Absolutely, because obviously you don't get anything. But honestly, the Cowboys should be trying to inquire about trading him and then also getting picks, in my opinion. Just because, look, I know that there's money involved, but Cooper is a better player, like a much better player.
Yeah.
So, and I think, you know, we're in a team where they're kind of, I don't know what the plan is with the Atlanta Falcons right now, but I think Cooper, you know, with Matt Ryan and what's going on there with Pitts, suddenly gives their offense a shot in their arm that kind of makes them at least relevant, a little bit more relevant than they were last year. I don't know. I think if I'm the Cowboys, I'm asking for more.
All right, we're gonna ask people on Twitter as soon as this podcast is done. Would you trade Amari for Calvin Ridley? I got a feeling Cowboy fans are going to be in favor of that trade. I would be fine with it, but I agree with you. I would want more.
I don't hate it. I want more, you know.
Okay.
I'm not going to cry about it.
It's fair enough. All right. One more quick break to tell you guys about Built Bar. This time of the year, everybody's given up on their New Year's resolutions, but not us. We are sticking to ours. And ours is to eat better because we've got Built Bar. Built Bars just taste so good. They're only 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Best of all, they are covered in 100% real chocolate. Compare that to a candy bar that has like 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. They also have so many great flavors, including mint brownie, coconut almond. And the new flavor this month is white chocolate cookies and cream. They are all delicious, and the new flavors are coming in all of the time. Go to built.com and use promo code LOCK15 to get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, last question here from Chandler. What game from the 2021 season do you think defined last year's team? I think a lot of people would say New England, but that seemed to be more of a turning point, not what the team was actually destined to be.
Man, that's a good question. You know, that Raiders game, as terrible as it was, like there's a lot of kind of season-wide themes it feels like you could extrapolate from, right? Mm-hmm. Just kind of getting in their own way, refereeing in general, and then just an explosive offense that can kind of just erupt at times and just kind of show incredible ability.
What about the Bucs game in week 1? Because you had the defense create turnovers, right? You had the offense for spurts look really, really good. You had Greg Zuerlein missing a big field goal, I believe, early in that game. And when you absolutely needed to get a stop on defense, you just couldn't get one.
Yeah, I think that's a good one too, for sure. Yeah, I think there's a couple of different games, and that's maybe why it's the season-wide narrative, right? Is because a couple of these games can kind of define pretty
Yep.
well what happened overall the season. So, yeah, I think both of those are kind of nice
That that game
microcosms
just
of the
felt
whole
so
season.
much like the Cowboys can absolutely play with any team in the league, but can
Will
they
they?
beat the can they beat the good teams, right?
Yeah, 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 and that's kind of what we dealt with all season is they are able to beat anybody, any of these. I mean, that's the thing about what like again watching the Super Bowl. It's like the Cowboys could have won that game.
Oh my
I
gosh,
mean,
yeah. Yeah.
they could have lost it by 25, but they also could have won those games. So it's
Yep.
frustrating to see it, but that's ultimately what that season was about.
All right, that is it for today's show. Tomorrow's show is going to be a really fun one. We're going to continue previewing linebackers that the Cowboys could maybe draft sometime on day 2. We've got some fun prospects that we're going to talk about tomorrow. I know there's one guy in there that you're really excited to
Oh
talk
yeah,
about.
definitely.
So join us for that. And then on Friday, we've got a special episode. It's going to be you and Joey talking about
That's
how
right.
to tear down the Cowboys team. We talked about trying to go all in for 2022 and 2023. We're going to do the flip side on Friday. You guys are going to talk about what it means to rebuild this team that probably actually needs a rebuild for the first time since
Ever?
ever.
I mean, since the
Maybe?
90s. I mean, when was the last time they actually tried to do a full rebuild, like and admitted that it was a rebuild? I don't know that I can remember
Not
Jerry
under
Jones ever talking
Jones,
like
right?
that. No, so it's always
No.
been a reload.
It's always been a
So
reload.
yeah,
So that's going to be a fun episode on Friday. Make sure you're downloading your podcast wherever you get this podcast: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Cowboys. You can follow Landon at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. We'll see you guys next time.